right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our District Administration web seminar here today, which is entitled Aligning District Goals to Drive Continuous Improvement, which is brought to you by our generous support of our sponsor with us, Decision Ed. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items, and we'll get right to the presentation. If at any time you need any technical support today, please use the Q&A panel, and that is at the bottom of your screen. It's the red button with the question mark. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have here today with the Q&A session, and that will be happening at the end of the presentation. You can submit a question by also using the Q&A module at the bottom of your screen. You can also minimize, maximize, or manually change the size of each module. That includes the slides and the media player where you can see all this now to meet your own specifications. So just move your cursor to the corners of the module to see the minimize and maximize options. Also, I'd like to bring your attention to our related content modules as well. The related content, or it's that blue icon with the paperclip, are resources that are related to today's topic, including our speaker's website and some upcoming web seminars from our sponsor. You can also click on the profile icon, which is the pink one with the person's silhouette, to see the speaker bio of our presenter. And I'm going to go over his credentials in a minute. And it also includes links to his Twitter handle, for example. There's also an attendee chat. That's the blue icon with the message image. Just please feel free to share any thoughts there as they come to you during our presentation. We would like this webinar to be as interactive as possible. Also, the last point I'd like to make is that if you would like to access this web seminar at a later time, you'd be pleased to know that everyone who is registered and all of you who are attending today will receive an email with a link to the slides as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. We have Dr. Jay Marino, who is Assistant Superintendent of Support Services, Technology, and Data Research at Decatur Public Schools District in Illinois. Great to have you with us, Dr. Marino. I'm excited for this web seminar.
Awesome. Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. As stated, I'm Jay Marino, coming to you live from Decatur, Illinois, which, if you don't know where it is, it's basically in south central Illinois, about a 3-hour drive from Chicago. We're right near the capital of Springfield. So today's presentation is action-packed and fast-paced. You're going to see a lot of slides and a lot of information. It's kind of like taking a drink out of a fire hose, but in education, that's our style and our pace. So today's presentation is really intended to provide a vision and a concept and a framework for how to engage everyone in the process of continuous improvement. And so, of course, we've titled it Aligning District Goals to Drive Continuous Improvement. So I'm hoping by the end of the presentation, I've clearly articulated what could be a blueprint or a path for you in your own situation. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about me. On the screen, you can see some of my background and experiences. I am currently Assistant Superintendent. Decatur Public Schools is a K-12 district with about 8,000 students. I do have responsibilities for student services, IT, data research, and accountability. This approach that I'm getting ready to present to you comes from 30 years of experience, my own personal experience from about every position in education, from classroom teacher to superintendent of schools. In addition, over the past 13 years, I've served as a change agent in the country of the Netherlands. And you can see on your screen a location map that shows all of the different school systems in Holland, in the country of the Netherlands, that is actually using and has embraced this exact change model that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So I guess in a way it's been proven here regionally, locally, nationally, and internationally as well. So over the past 13 years, I've been fortunate to make 22 visits to that country, helping some of their lowest performing schools. And what you're going to learn about today is a primary core strategy for that. So let's get into it. This approach is really all about trying to help drive that vision, mission, goals, strategies, action plans that all of us are responsible for as leaders within our educational systems. So there's likely in your system a district strategic plan. If you're a building principal, maybe it's a school improvement plan. Whatever level of the organization that you have responsibility for, there's likely some intended goal or outcome. And so what we want to do is talk about how do we actually make progress that we can measure according to what we're setting out as that vision, mission, values, or goals. So let's talk a little bit about the concept of the plan. You're going to hear me continuously reference what's your plan all about. It might be a strategic plan, a school improvement plan, or even a classroom plan. Regardless, we're all on a journey to drive improvements. And data helps us understand how that system is performing. But data alone isn't enough. And you're going to hear me probably overemphasize the fact that too much focus on data and not enough focus on the teaming aspect won't get us the results that we're looking for. So educators must know how to use effective data in order to drive change and really engage everybody in that improvement process. So the strategic plan basically in most educational systems is the plan that we're all working toward. It could be a school improvement plan, a district strategic plan, but I want to share an analogy that I'm going to build on throughout this presentation, and that is what's called the bridge analogy. And anyone who's been in my seminars or presentations, they get tired of hearing about the bridge, but it's the simplest way to articulate what this continuous improvement process is all about. So I want you to look at the pillars that are upholding this bridge. You've got 3 of them, and I call those pillars of success teamwork, collaboration, and shared leadership. Without them, they don't sustain an improvement journey. On the right side, you see point A, or what we call the current state. That's how our system is currently performing. And all the way across the bridge is what's called point B, or the desired state. We often define that as our strategic plan, our school improvement plan, our mission, vision, values, goals, what it is we aspire to become over the course of 3 to 5 years. So in this bridge analogy, the concept is to get from point A to point B, we have to have those supporting structures, that's teams in place, using data to monitor that progress along the way. So how do you communicate your organization's point B? If I were to walk around your school system and ask people, hey, what are the core goals of your school or your school district? Would people be able to articulate what those 2, 3, or 4 core foundational goals are for your system? And I want to kind of use an illustration in this aspect. I want you to think in terms of what does it look like in your strategic plan? And back in the early years, I wrote an article for Scholastic Administrator called Plan on the Page. And the concept was, can we distill a detailed and complex strategic plan down to a page that basically represents that mission, vision, values, goals, beliefs, strategies into something that we can use to really articulate what our point B is all about. So in a simplified way, the plan on the page becomes the model that we use in order to try and drive improvements. So we're going to take a quick poll here, get you actively engaged, and I want a simple yes/no question. So I'm going to ask participants out there. The question is, in your system, our stakeholders understand the strategic plan and they align their efforts to that plan. If you feel you could indicate yes or no, please do so by indicating on this particular slide. And I'll leave this up for just a moment, and then we'll take a look at what some of those results look like. So back in the day, we used to use binders. The dreaded binders that were 2 or 3 inches thick, and they would sit on a shelf, and maybe 1 or 2 people knew what was actually in the binder. And this strategy is really all about intending to determine how we simplify that message and get that to a place where stakeholders have an understanding of what our point B looks like. So here's simple results that we're taking a look at. And it looks like about a third would say, yeah, people know our plan and they are aligning their efforts. And I would say that's very truthful and honest, and does represent most organizations, not just in education. So let's talk about what do we do about that. And so I'm going to introduce a concept that may be familiar to some of you, and that's called the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard is really the way in which we say, how do we know if we're accomplishing our point B? What does that look like? And so the scorecard concept gives us a way to identify metrics and outcomes that say, if we're doing our plan well, how would we measure it and how would we know how successful we were toward that? So the balanced scorecard is an important first step in your school district, and we use it to do really 4 key things. Here's the purpose of the scorecard: communicating the vision of what we're trying to accomplish together, aligning the day-to-day work, prioritizing, and measuring and monitoring. Many of you have heard the term, what gets measured gets done. And so the balanced scorecard is the way at the highest level of the organization to say, these handful of measures in each of the goals of our strategic plan are the foundational pieces that we're going to look at to determine if we're making progress. So let's talk for just another minute about this concept of balanced scorecard and what are the fundamental concepts that should be included. So in the scorecard, these are the elements that any system that's looking to really utilize data in a scorecard format to really set the foundation for continuous improvement. We're looking at different things such as, what's going on with addressing all goals? Do we have 3 or 4 measures for each goal of the strategic plan? The next piece is alignment. Are we aligning those goals from the boardroom, from the district, from the strategic plan, all the way down into the individual classroom? And you're going to see some examples of that in just a couple of minutes. The other concept is there is no exact metric methodology. A lot of people will say, how do I know what should be an effective target to go with the goal? You can't punch in numbers and then spit something out and say, well, this should be our target. We're looking at a variety of different things when we're setting targets, such as comparison. What do districts that kind of look like us, how are they performing in some of these same goal areas? We look at trend data. How have we been performing, and what's an expected or reasonable target that we might include as part of our target? And lastly, we want to look at the notion of what's reasonable given our initiatives. So it's all of those pieces combined that bring us to the place where the balanced scorecard can really serve as the foundational data foundation that helps us understand if we're making progress toward our point B. The last 2 items I'll touch on is behind the scenes versus public. There's an awful lot of data that school systems are using on a regular basis. Some of that data is very public, and some of it is very in the weeds, micro data that individuals and teams are using on a consistent basis. So when you think of a scorecard, think in terms of how are we going to represent what we're expecting as far as results, and think of the behind the scenes data use as what teams are using day in and day out that are leading up to some of those scorecard measures. The last point is probably the most important, and that is teams drive change. Data doesn't drive change. Data informs teams who are driving change. And I'll continue to illustrate that as we work through. So in this image, I like to use this as an example of how do we empower all stakeholders? And if you're looking at this, this is a non-representation of teamwork, collaboration, and shared leadership, where if you're the big bird in an organization, the boss, and you're sitting on top, your view looks a whole lot different than the further you get down the rung. And by the way, that white stuff is not snow. And that's how it sometimes can feel in an organization that really hasn't engaged people in the goal setting and the data collection and the team effort that's driving toward those goals. So I'm going to regroup another time with this concept of data and teams. And I call this the great tip of the iceberg. In so many organizations today, we are talking data, 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 analytics, measurement, and we're so focused on the results side of it. But in my opinion, this is the tip of the iceberg. When we are looking at data, what we're not seeing is the underlying work that teams should be doing. It's teams that drive change. It's teams that drive continuous improvement, and they're utilizing that data in a way that helps them inform if the strategies and actions that they've selected are actually making an impact. So don't forget, we all want to be data-driven, but if we're honoring data and we're not engaging teams in the process, we're never going to see some of those breakthrough improvements that we're all trying to make. So I'm going to drop another quick poll in here, keep you engaged, make sure you're alert. How many of you would say yes or no to this question? We have an effective data team structure embedded into our culture. So as you're responding to this, I want you to think in terms of, are teams organized within your school or your school district? Some of you may call them professional learning teams or professional learning communities. Some might call them instructional teams. They might be school improvement teams, district strategic planning teams. But if there is a team embedded, is a job embedded? In other words, it's not an add-on, an extra, or something that people have to do outside of the workday, but rather, is it embedded into your system? So we're going to take a quick look at those results to kind of see what that looks like. And you can see, similar to the other poll, about a third of the individuals said, yep, we've got that in place. And I'm guessing, feel free to use the chat or anything else to kind of comment. What do you call those teams in your structure? Are you calling them professional learning communities? What does that look like? And here's the challenge if we're answering no to that question. How do we find time embedded into the workday when teams can come together and meaningfully look at data to determine what course of action is working and what adjustments might need to be made? So let's talk next about, let's get into some data speak. We all talk about data analysis or data analytics. And what we're really talking about here is how do we review information and come to some conclusions about what's going on in our system. So today we hear a lot about the term data literacy. And in the data literacy concept, we're really after 4 core components. And you can see that illustration on your screen. But data literacy really describes the ability to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data. It's engaging people so that their actions and decisions drive better decision making for the organization. It's about using data effectively for educational actions and outcomes. And it's really about deriving meaningful information from that data in order to determine if we're on target to accomplish our point B. Don't forget about that bridge analogy. That point B is what we're shooting for. So how do we measure and monitor along the way to know if we're on target? So here's some interesting research I thought I would pull out. Simple slide. This comes from Hanover Research. And basically, the intent here is we need to be diligent in our educational systems to develop strong data literacy, data proficiency, and effective collaborative teams that can use that data in order to drive improvements within the system. So understandably, teachers don't necessarily enter our system with data literacy or fluency or even proficiency. In fact, here's some stats. 77%, that's the percent of teachers who agree their school leaders encourage employees to use data. So 3/4 would report, yeah, we're encouraged to use data. 57% is the percent of teachers who agree that their school leaders are regularly using that data. So look at the little bit of a discrepancy between what the expectation is and what teachers are actually perceiving. And the last statistic is 17%. And that is the percent of teachers who report they learned how to use data in their educational preparation program. So we're talking less than 1 out of 5 who would come into our systems and feel like they have a fighting chance at being engaged in a data-driven discussion. So what does that mean for us as educators? Well, let's again look to the research. Hanover did a really nice job, Hanover Research, and basically said, here's 6 things that if you're not sure where to go next, these 6 are research-based approaches that teams can use for effective use of data. And of course, number 1, forming a team. There should always be a collective group of people who's looking at data or in charge of a particular goal. So once we form the team, we're setting the goal and metrics, making sure everyone understands what the goal is and how we're going to measure our results and our progress along the way. Well, then we're into the data. We've got to identify what data are we going to collect along the way, and then we need a system by which we're going to capture and collect that. Once we have it, those teams are discussing, analyzing, and determining if the strategies they selected are bearing fruit or having an impact that's going to lead to goal accomplishment. So it's through these simple steps that in your system, you might have the ability to ensure that you've got teams looking at data. So I'm going to spend just a moment on this slide, and this is all about the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle of continuous improvement. This is stemmed from the auto industry way back when through Edward Deming, who tried to put together a reasonable process that teams on the work floor would use to gain greater efficiency, higher effectiveness, and greater stability in the product. So this Plan, Do, Study, Act is really a process that any teams can use. And in highly effective school systems, you will find Plan, Do, Study, Act data teams that are using this model. And it's really 4 simple steps: identifying your goals and strategies, creating an action plan, actually doing something, but not going too far continuing that action until we study the results and see if what we thought would make a difference is actually making a difference. And then we use that data to make adjustments. And you're going to see another example of that here momentarily. So let's talk for a minute about this concept of data in our systems. a lot of systems are very, very good at gravitating toward those high stakes state testing. They're looking at whatever their state assessment is. They're looking at PSAT and ACT and SAT and all of these high stake tests. The problem with that is if that's all we're looking at, we're only measuring how the system performed through the course of a year. What we need to get really proficient at is how do we get predictive analytics? Things that we're looking at on a daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis that tell us along the way, are we on target to actually make our goal? So I want to show you a real simple example. And this is my own personal data. I figured I'd make it personal. This is off my Fitbit. And in my house, my wife and I have Fitbit, and we kind of have some collaborative competition. And what we're doing is basically setting some health goals for ourselves. So I'm going to give you a quick analogy and personal story, and then let you apply it into your educational setting. So on my Fitbit, it tracks how many steps am I getting. And at any point in time, I can pull up the phone on my app. It doesn't matter what time of day, and I can say, hey, how am I doing on my steps? My goal is a minimum 10,000 steps a day. So if I divide that out, I got a pretty good idea on how many steps I need to be at by 9 a.m., by noon, by 3 p.m., by 6, and as I get closer to bed. And that tells me if I need to do something different. So if my goal is 10,000 steps and I'm looking at noon and I've got 2,000 steps, I know that if I don't make a change or do something, I'm likely not going to accomplish my goal. Well, you can take that same concept. I have the same thing for calorie burn, for number of miles. On the upper right, you can see, what's my weight at and what does that look like, and then even sleep metrics. So I'm constantly engaged with my health metrics, knowing that I have a very specific goal. And I used to weigh myself every single morning, and it would drive me nuts because I'd be up a half a pound and down a half a pound and up and down and up and down and up and down. And what I realized was if I'm just paying attention to my steps and my calorie intake and some of those other metrics, I really didn't need to care about what the weigh-in looked like because I knew each week what I started to do, I do a Friday morning weigh-in. And so it doesn't matter what happens on a daily basis. I know predictively looking at my steps, my calories, the miles walked, all of that, I can tell you with exact precision what my Friday weigh-in is going to be if I'm monitoring the data along the way. I can also tell you when maybe I don't want to weigh in on this Friday because I know what my predictive analytics look like. So the data cuts both ways. But I just wanted to show you a very practical example of how we're using dashboards in our daily life. If you're like me, I'm looking at that Fitbit probably every 15, 20 minutes. If I'm in a meeting that isn't real engaging, I might look every couple of minutes. But the concept is data's all around us. And if you think about it in a very simple way, like something important to you where you set a goal and you say, I want this many steps a week, I want to be at this weight, I want this much sleep, and I can actually have a data system that will help me predict on a weekly basis if I meet that goal. That's what we want to see happen in our schools. Now, of course, you probably understand the other side of that, and that is, instead of seeing a doctor regularly and doing checkups and all the preventative health issues, this is what we call the autopsy or the post-mortem analytics. Doesn't help us. All it does is tell us what went wrong, and after it's too late to really do anything about. So I hope that illustration helps kind of connect with you in this whole goal setting and data collection concept. So let's bring it back to simplicity, okay? Right now you're looking at the dashboard of a vehicle, right? So if I'm getting in my car and I'm going on a journey from point A to point B, it doesn't matter if it's across town to the grocery store or if I'm making a drive into Chicago, 3 hours away, First thing I do when I get into my car is I turn on the engine and I'm looking at dashboard instrumentation. What am I going to look at? Do I have enough gas? As I'm traveling along the journey, I'm looking at my speed limit. Am I within range of where I should be? I'm monitoring from time to time oil pressure. And every once in a while, as I'm navigating my car, something happens in the car, and that is a dashboard warning light. Something in the system says, hey, Jay, pay attention. There's something going on in your system that you might want to pay attention to. And this is the power of data analytics and being data-driven in your organization. Do you have sensitive enough instrumentation that will tell you from the time you leave point A until the time you arrive at point B, are you confident that all of the metrics and information you're looking at are on target for having you safely arrive at your destination or your goal through that journey? So it's a simple illustration, but an important one. And I would suggest to you that in most organizations, there's not enough of a sensitive dashboard or instrumentation that helps us know if we're on target to reach point B of our journey. So here's the opposite extreme. And you're going to see in a moment, I'm a huge space geek. I love space travel. This is a space shuttle dashboard. And I want you to compare what that dashboard looks like compared to this dashboard. The concept is this: we can't overdo it by measuring absolutely everything that we could measure. We can be data rich and information poor. So let's not overdo it either. What are those core metrics? Do we have some summative, longer term, and do we have some more frequent data that tells us if we are on track? So as I said, I like to incorporate some personal illustrations. So I was born July 1969, and my mother likes to tell the story of how when during the labor process up on the TV was the flight to the moon and all that was going on in that realm. So this kind of hits home just given my year and the stories that my parents told me about the day that I was born. So essentially, I want you to think about this. And here's what not a lot of people know. Especially in the early days, most flights to space were off course more than 90% of the time. Can you imagine that? 90% of the time they're off course. And that's because they utilize data along the way to make what's called mid-course correction burns. And it was those constant burns based on data and adjustments they were making that allowed them, from the time they launched point A until the time they got to the moon point B, that they were able to dial in their strategies and their course adjustments and changes in the system in order to safely arrive. So I'm going to play for you an actual transmission that occurred in July of '69 from NASA to the flight crew about a mid-course correction burn that was going to be necessary. So take a listen.
This is Apollo Control at 26 hours. The ignition time for this mid-course correction will be 26 hours, 44 minutes, 57 seconds, about 44 minutes from now. It will be a service propulsion system maneuver. Duration of the burn will be 3 seconds. The delta V, 21.3 feet per second. This mid-course maneuver should reduce the pericynthion of Apollo 11's trajectory from the present 175 nautical miles to 60 nautical miles.
11, this is Houston. We've completed the uplink. The computer is yours.
Thank you.
So it's a really good analogy of traveling from point A to point B requires mid-course corrections. Okay, and if you use the space analogy, 90% of the time, they were not directly on course. So imagine what it looks like in our school systems as we're working on a reading goal, a math goal, a graduation goal, a behavior goal. And we start the year in August and we end the year in May or June. We're going to be making 90% of the time, if we have a good sensitive instrumentation and data system, we're going to be making mid-course corrections if we're smart, because we don't want to have the trajectory that we see early on in our data. And so in that simple space example, they were 175 nautical miles off course at whatever point in time in that journey. And a 3-second burn, thinking and doing differently, was going to take them from 175 miles off course to 60 miles. And I'm sure you can imagine there was a burn in the near future that took them from 60 miles to 20, and from 20 to 5, and from 5 to 3, and so on. And through those mid-course correction burns, we end up arriving at our goal and at our destination. And without those mid-course corrections, we're likely way off course. So I'm going to bring some practicality to all of this. And I want to show you some very practical examples from districts I've either led, worked in, or consulted with over the course of my time. And let's see what this theory into practice looks like. So this is just a sample of a school district that I am doing work with that created a strategic plan and asked for my help to say, Jay, what would we do in our balanced scorecard? What are the 3, 4, or 5 measures that we could hold ourselves accountable to within each of these 5 goals? So this is just a district level sample, but I want you to notice something. Even if you can't read the slides, you've got a SMART measure or indicator. You've got some trend data, historical trend, because you need to know where you've been in order to know what's reasonable for where you're going to. And then you'll see a target or a goal of some type. So the scorecard is kind of a one-page way to say, are we on target to accomplish our goal? So here's what it looks like if you were to walk into a school, okay? This is what we call the school scorecard or dashboard. And in many of our schools, if you walk into the main entrance, you're greeted by a SMART goal that's included in the school improvement plan. And of course, that school goal is aligned to the district goal, but it shows what does the data look like here at our school. And you're going to see data points that are added daily, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, not just at the end of the year. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have a data system like we are here in Decatur, we're able to produce a digital scorecard for our school. And I know you can't read this, but it will give you an image. You're going to see attendance data that updates daily if I need it to, behavior infractions, social emotional aspects of our learning, as well as academic achievement. So you're seeing kind of the tangible, which looks like this, which is a lot of authentic. This is a classroom scorecard. So how do you engage kindergartners, 5th graders, 9th graders in the goals of the classroom? Well, you create SMART goals, and then you start tracking that progress in what we call a data center or a classroom scorecard or dashboard. This happens to be a kindergarten one. So it doesn't matter what grade level. The key is, do kids know what the goals are? And do they know if they're on target from point A to point B in order to make progress? And again, here's the digital sample that you can get out of your data system. Decision Ed produces a report like this for our data systems where we can see a class digital scoreboard. And it has things like physically present and ready to learn. Is there a respectful learning environment? And what does reading and math achievement look like in this particular classroom? So I'm going to share with you what I believe is the most powerful aspect of any school improvement effort. Can I get a drum roll, please? Here's what it is. How do we engage students in that process? And schools that engage their students, which are the boots on the ground, front line of student achievement, how do we get kids engaged in that process? Well, here's how we do it. We have students setting personalized SMART goals that are aligned to the classroom objectives, that are aligned to the school improvement plan, that are aligned back to the district scorecard. So as superintendent, what I always said was, I want 8,000 kids working on my district strategic plan. And the way you do that is through alignment throughout your system. So it's getting kids engaged in this. And what's really nice is, for 21st century learning, what if the students actually led the traditional parent-teacher conference and we turned it into a student-led conference where they're sharing their dashboard and their data and their goals and can talk about analyzing their results, what's working and what needs to be done differently. So as you might expect, here's the student scorecard, what that might look like. And this is all real-time data. At any point in time that I pull this out of our system, I'm able to see attendance, grades, behavior, and a myriad of any other data points that are important down to the individual student level. So I've got one more question I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to begin bringing some closure to this. And then we will turn it over to Mark Mason from Decision Ed, who will have a few words, and then of course Q&A. But I want one more polling question. So I shared with you some examples of what the digital dashboard looked like at a school level, at a classroom level, at a student level. But none of that happens unless you have a pretty robust data system, a data warehouse, if you will. So the next question is just a simple yes or no. In your current situation, do you have an effective and comprehensive data management system? Okay, this is beyond Excel spreadsheets. This is a comprehensive data system, what I would call a single sign-on, cloud-based with access to any and all data points that might be integrated into that data system. So will you take just a moment and indicate if that is something that's present in your system as you know it today? And of course, when we look at the results here momentarily, the answer is if we don't have one and we're serious about being data-driven, you're going to need to be exploring what kind of a solution will help you provide the analytics and metrics in your system that helps you arrive at point B. So this is refreshing that at least over half would suggest they do have a data management system. So that gives us kind of a pulse on what are we seeing out in the schools. And there are a lot of different systems out there, a lot of them with similar comparative features. It's all about fit and feel and partnering with the right organization that you feel can help best meet your needs. So here's a quick sample, and I'm gonna end with just some practical samples from our own data warehouse. This is what my data warehouse looks like today, and what you'll notice is it's very graphical. And if we were in the live database, anytime I would mouse over any piece of data in this, it would pop up and give me options, and it would let me do what's called a drill down or drill through. It would let me start to sort data, make some inferences, understand what's going on. I can sort it by school, by year, by grade level, by day of the week. You happen to be looking right now at daily attendance. I can look at this and get a sense of, you know, what grade level looks like. 7th grade has the worst typical daily attendance, whereas my pre-K, kindergarten and first, you know, the more motivated learners have higher attendance, and then it picks back up as kids get closer into graduation. So just interesting information, but the power isn't what the graphs and charts look like. It's the features of drill down and drill through. So if you look On the left-hand side, you'll see a variety of menus that we have, and this is the work of my research department, where we said, hey, let's look at enrollment at any given time. This uploads nightly. At any given time, I get data that's 12, 24 hours old at the latest, and I know current enrollments. I know attendance, absenteeism, discipline, failing grade reports, social emotional surveys we do 3 times a year, our FastBridge assessment, which is done 3 times a year, my kindergarten assessment, our state test, PSAT, AP, whatever data set is important, we incorporate it and embed it right into our data system. And at any point in time, I can click on any one of those charts and graphs and start to drill down and drill through all the way down to the individual student level to say, who are those kids? And that's something very powerful that our teams are using. So I'm going to wrap this up with a statement, quote many of us have heard by the great one, Wayne Gretzky, who said, "I skate to where the puck is going, not where it has been." And essentially, this is what we're seeing out in the future as far as where is data analytics going. And of course, you're going to see things like artificial intelligence, and that's the simulation of human intelligence processes done by computers. You're going to see edge computing, where data storage is brought closer to the end user, making it more accurate, manageable, and timely. You're going to see self-service, cloud-based, single sign-on, where I log into one place and I've got access to any and all data that's important to me, and it's set by my role within the organization. So as superintendent or assistant superintendent, I see everything. But my building principals only see data for their own school. Classroom teachers have their own dashboard, but they only see their classroom. But the key is the data set looks the same throughout the system, and my level of clearance is dependent upon the role that I have in the organization. So I'm going to conclude with this slide. I did put my professional website out there. It's jmarino.me. I've got over 100 articles, many of which I've written. I did my dissertation topic on this, which is available. And I've got probably over 60 video vignettes from the last 10 years, really illustrating a lot of this work. You'll even see some samples from Holland, where you may not, I'd put subtitles in because they're speaking in Dutch. But I did want to leave you with a resource. If you wanted to go check out the website, look for resources, you can also email me from there if you're interested in more information. And lastly, there's a book that we published in Holland. This was for the principal preparation program in the Netherlands. We basically wrote the book to tell them, how do you manage your school in this data-driven way? So it chronicles 9 Dutch schools as well as 3 schools where I was superintendent here in Illinois, in elementary, middle, and high school, and it kind of chronicles the story. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mark Mason. And Mark is the Chief Technical Architect of Decision Ed. He has over 20 years of experience working with PK-12 data. He's consulted with districts from 3,000 to 300,000 enrollment across the country, and has worked with multiple state-level departments of education, consulting on data management. So Mark has also become a friend of mine, and of course, Mark and I collaborate regularly on what's next. I think he might be tired of me by now, because I'm always saying, Mark, let's get this AI feature going, or let's get moving on this. So Mark's been a great partner with us. So Mark, I'm going to turn it to you to close us out. And do you have control of the slides, or do you need me to advance it? Got it. I think you're on mute, Mark.
Dr. Marino, thank you for today, and also thank you for that guidance. It's not an imposition. I enjoy and I learn those conversations that you and I have. So thank you very much for that, and for the points you shared today. I'm going to take just a few minutes and just wrap up some of our content today. I'd like to zero in on the role of the data platform. And as that relates to the topics that we've been talking about, aligning district goals to drive continuous improvement. You know, we all have a tremendous amount of data. Our challenge is turning that data into information and our ability to derive insights. So I'm going to touch on a couple of key expectations that you should have in a data platform. The first is information enabled at all levels. Your data platform should deliver data ready for beneficial use. When teams come together to work on strategies, the data has to be ready for use by the team. If you ever sit down with a team of people and you hear words such as extract or upload or download, think to yourself, this may be a little bit of a red flag. Is your team spending their time collecting and assembling data, or are they spending their time analyzing and deriving insights? And data has to be prepared to align across multiple levels within the organization. I mean, if we think about starting with data, maybe an example is number of students that are proficient on a given assessment. And we start to turn this into information. We start to pull in other factors about the student: attendance, behavior, academic performance. And now we're creating much more powerful information. But we need to be able to quickly move that view from the district to the school, to the classroom, to the student. It needs to move easy. It needs to move seamlessly. Analytics tell the story of what is occurring in your district, your schools, and your classrooms. Your data platform has to provide the ability to display information which answers questions, both simple and sophisticated. For example, let's go back to that question about looking at proficiency of students. And as I start to add in other information, and I want to change how I'm viewing that information. So maybe I want to segment results on a given assessment by number of days the student's been absent, or maybe what the teacher absenteeism is, or couple that with academic data. So those become much more sophisticated questions, relying on metric to metric comparisons. So it's really a key, because it doesn't take long to move past simple questions and be into more complex questions on your journey to insights. And the other piece, and Dr. Marino touched on this just for a bit, supplementing your team's insights with assisting technology should be seamless. It shouldn't be a secondary step or going outside of your tool. Integration of artificial intelligence type techniques can automatically be deriving meaningful statistics while you're working. Expose scenarios that the team might not have initially considered. Dig in, find those areas where the nuggets of gold may be hidden. Think about, once as I'm building information and I'm building insights, how do I share this information? Collaboration is the key. We've heard quite a bit this afternoon from Dr. Marino about collaboration, working together in teams. Your data platform must provide an active involvement with secure collaboration. Information should be shared easily, but it should be shared securely. This is confidential data, has to be protected. So your data platform should control how information is shared and ensure that as information is shared, it's protected. Only those people who are allowed to see that information may be able to see it. And the final topic I just want to touch on real briefly is data literacy. We use a term at Decision Ed called scalable data literacy. If we look across our organizations, not everyone in the organization is at the same level of data literacy. You're going to have some people who just want to see a dashboard. Maybe they do simple filtering. You're going to have other people who are power users, and they want to dig in and build their own visualization, building different perspectives. That's true of every organization, but the data platform must support all users. It must meet the users where they are today and provide a growth path to take them forward as the overall organization grows in data literacy. Data literacy is a fact of life. It's growing, and we're going to see more of it in the future. So that was just a couple quick thoughts about expectations of a data platform. At Decision Ed, we provide a data platform. We would love to visit with you if you have any questions. If you'd like to connect with other districts that are engaged in this journey to continuous improvement, if you'd like to see examples, visit with us at the website, set up meetings with us, tap into some of the resources that we have available for you. So Steve, I think it's time for some question and answer, and I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you very much, Mark. As you say, we've now come to the Q&A portion of our webinar, where you can now send in your questions. And so Dr. Marino or Mark can answer your questions live on the air. I'm actually going to highlight the Q&A box so you can easily find it at the bottom of your screen there. And we do have one question that just came in that I believe this one will be towards you, Mark, because at one point you were talking about standard templates. And so this person was wondering, are these standard templates within Decision Ed, or do schools have to build them?
Yes, they are standard templates. There's actually over 1,000 different templates that we have built into our system. They're not designed that everybody uses all of them. They're pick and choose the ones that fit for you. You also have the ability to modify those, and you have the ability to create your own.
Perfect. Thanks. And kind of like a follow-up question. So Dr. Marino, you can probably answer this. So we're wondering, if you've used any of the standard templates, or if you're mostly doing custom templates, and if you can give like an example, for example.
Yeah. In our district, we've got my research team. I've got one person who has sole responsibility for the upkeep of our dashboards, customized reporting. And basically what we do is we start with the basic templates as the starting point. But then what happens is, as your teams get into these discussions, they start asking questions, and then the questions come to the data team. Hey, can Data Warehouse help us answer this question? And then we go to work and say, well, what if we created a customized report that's standard? So whenever you want that information, you click a button, put your date range, and it will basically generate for them, for the user, whatever it is that they're looking for. And I'll give you a real quick practical example, especially during COVID. We were having a lunch provider who did breakfast and lunch for us, and they could never get a good prediction on how many meals to create and prepare. And the reason was, they would say, hey, you show 800 kids at this school, but we're only feeding 600 for breakfast. What's going on? We said, well, what if we ran a report that every night would upload, and it would show what was the first period tardies at that particular school? And lo and behold, they were having a lot of tardies. So they would prepare for full enrollment, 800 meals. They were only serving 600. And we could get a really good data set to our third party, our food service provider, who now we had a customer report running, and every day they would get a 5-day running number that would show what did it look like. We also tagged kids that were on COVID, we called remote learning for COVID reasons. So it would R code them, remote code them. So through these calculations and data in our system in one report, it would say, here's how many kids are out because of COVID. Here's the average running for first period absences. Here's any enrollment fluctuations. And they were able to dial in, based on that predictive data, what they should prepare for meals, and eliminated waste, increased efficiency. And it's just a real practical, even non-academic way in which we're using our data system to help efficiencies across multiple departments. And that's one example. If we had time, I could give you 50 of them. And when our principals say, Jay, I need a report for our MTSS structure that shows kids over 10% absences, have 3 or more office referrals, scored less than 50 percentile on this have a grade of a D or worse. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on, the analytics, but it all comes from the users saying, hey, can our data system do this? So we started with basic templates that Data Warehouse Decision Ed provides, and then we customize and tweak. And I've got someone on staff now who can even tweak the dashboard. They can change the colors, the charts, add different things. So it used to be we had to call Decision Ed, set up a time, put in a ticket. Now we can manage a lot of some of these simpler changes on our own. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, yeah, I definitely do. Thank you very much. And actually, so we're at the top of the hour here. But if there were any questions that we didn't get to today, we at DA will be sharing them with our partners at Decision Ed, so they can get back to your questions after today's webinar, and they'll also be forwarded to Dr. Marino if he has any questions for him. And actually, as I go through my closing slides, in just a few moments, please feel free to continue submitting your questions. If any come to mind, then I'll make sure they're sent over and can be answered at some point in the future. Also, if you or your colleagues, watch this on demand after today, you can still submit questions, and those will be automatically sent our way. But first off, thank you again to Dr. Marino for your time here today, and Mark. And of course, thank you as well to Decision Ed. And I'd also like to take just a quick minute to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today. For those of you who particularly enjoyed what you saw, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us here at DA, which is the leader in editorial news, trends, as well as current issues in K through 12. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to TA, and they stay up to date with us in our print magazine, online, in our newsletters, as well as web seminars like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe, that what Dr. Marino and Mark were talking about would be helpful to your colleagues, and I'm sure that is the case, you can please know that our team at DA will be sending you an email at some point tomorrow, and in that email will include an on-demand recording of this web seminar, and it'll also include other links to the slides. So look out for that at some point tomorrow. So with that, on behalf of DA, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much.